glad to have you here. Town Hall Academy, a summit for the forever automotive aftermarket student. Carm Capriotto here from Remarkable Results Radio. We've got a very interesting topic today, something that I would have to say that is on the top of mind of probably 50% of every shop owner in America. So I'm going to assume that's about 100 and some thousand, but potentially even 75 or 80,000 people saying, hey, how do I sell my business? What do I do next? What's going on with consolidation? And I've got some incredible people here to talk about it. And I'll introduce them in just one second. But hey, thanks and high fives to Jasper for their continuing support to make the Town Hall Academy free and no charge for the automotive aftermarket. You know, how many times has a customer said that a new vehicle may look and smell nice, but the reality is they come with seemingly endless monthly payments, higher license fees, and higher insurance premiums, and that's a given. Now, the better solution, remanufactured components from Jasper, means a new lease on life for your customer's trusted old friend. Thanks, Jasper, for supporting the Town Hall Academy. Let me introduce our panel. Dennis McCarron from Cardinal Brokers and principal of Cardinal Brokers. In fact, we've got three people on here from Cardinal Brokers. Norm Gaither. Hi, Norm.
Hello, Carm.
Nice to have you here.
Nice to be with you.
You know, Norm, I believe you have written extensively over the years. Didn't you write for Aftermarket Magazine?
I have, yes.
I was a big fan of yours back when my hair was not this color. Thank you so much. A legacy of our industry. And Joel Zaleski is here, also from Cardinal Brokers. And to be as fully and transparent as we possibly can, we also have Jeff Pullman, who recently sold his business. And what's so interesting, so that you all know, is he sold it to Monroe. And back in the day when he did that, maybe 6 months ago, Joel helped do part of that transaction. So there's some scar tissue connection here. I'm not quite sure how it all works, but there is. So if it sounds like, well, Joe said this and Jeff did that, you'll kind of all now get an idea of how it works. So here's what we're here to talk about. How do I value my business? Oh my God, look at this, my 3-bay garage. I'm doing $1 million. Somebody's going to walk in someday and pay me $1 million for my business. And, you know, we have to talk those people off the ledge when it comes to that. And, you know, maybe we can talk a little bit about that today. Also, the industry is consolidating like no tomorrow. The really big shops are looking to buy regional chains. As in the case of yours, Jeff, you had a 5-location operation, a great successful place, Jeff Pullman Tire, 5 locations, and the opportunity is huge among us. But one of the things that I believe is a problem in our industry is when that individual who wants to sell sits down with a buyer, and the buyer wants to know all this great stuff and wants to see a profit and loss statement, but the owner says, you really, you know, there's some stuff in that financial statement that isn't necessarily perfect. And the buyer says, well, if you're ready to sell, why didn't you make it perfect? Why didn't you normalize it, make it right? And so I think those are some, you know, V8 moments that we're here to share and to get our industry thinking about that level of preparation. So Norm, I want to go to you first, and I want to, you know, you've been around the industry forever, and I'm not meaning that as a knock that, you know, you're an old wise owl, but you are, and you've seen so much going on. Have you seen the consolidation opportunity as big as it's ever been in the past, like it is now?
I've been doing this about 35 years, and I will tell you that the small business owner is probably in the best shape to retire, sell his business as it's ever been. The number of people looking to acquire businesses now, it's been fantastic. It's never been as great, and the prices that because there are so many, the competition to drive the price up has been phenomenal. The cost of money for them has been so low that it's just been a great time I would say the last 3 years. Prior to that, it was in some cases half the offer. So right now is a great time to sell a business. It really is.
So it's a seller's market.
It definitely is.
And But that still doesn't mean that I can't, as a seller, I have to do my homework. I've got to make things right so that the buyer can make a quick and easy decision.
It's incumbent upon them to talk to someone, I would say at least 2 years before they want to sell, so that people can help them get their house in order, so to speak, so they can get the best possible price.
That is, I think everyone should take heed of that notice, that 2-year number. We all say, when should I start worrying, or when should I start caring, or when should I start fixing, and when do I start making things right? When do I start running a better business? And I don't know really what I mean by that, but there's a lot of things that an owner can do to make it right. Now, Jeff, you recently sold in November. Was that something that you were working on, or did it just like happen instantly overnight?
Well, no, it's not something I was working on. I had a succession plan going with my son, who was our general manager, and I just assumed that's how things were going to happen. I would eventually leave everything or sell to my son. But I had an inquiry from someone from Monroe, and really didn't follow up on it right away. Waited a few weeks because I didn't have an interest at the time, but finally called him back, talked to him, and things just start snowballing from there.
Okay. Two trains of thoughts that I would like to share. I know another multi-shop owner who's actually going to set up his son and daughter in their own shop, even though he's not ready to sell, anticipating the fact that a deal like what you just did came through, and they now have plenty of time under their belt to have their own place, and then they could turn around someday and do the same thing he just did. Interesting concept or thought. Joel, you were involved in that transaction. Were you the one who may have approached Jeffrey?
Yeah, and myself and one of our colleagues.
Okay, so here's a question: is a 5-store operation much more attractive to a company from your previous company, or would companies? This is a question to everyone:
Sure.
Is a company like Monroe or any other consolidator that you guys would see? Is a 1-store operation as attractive as 5, or will a big consolidator buy one really great going place?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the large strategic buyers, the consolidators out there are looking to buy up market share. So for them to go into a market, whether existing or new, they want to go in with larger deals, platform deals, or establish a footprint. So, in Jeff's case, going in to an area or expanding in an area with 5 stores at a time, you can do that with one deal right away, as opposed to buying 5 individual stores. And so, from a buyer's perspective, they get to leverage all those synergies immediately with 5 stores versus, drawing it out over time with 5 individual sellers. I mean, you can imagine just the administrative, burden from a buyer's perspective of having to go through this process 5 separate times, as opposed to, just with one seller who owns 5 stores.
Got it. Dennis, Norm, do you agree with that?
For sure. It's it's much more efficient for a larger company to come in and take over more at once, as opposed to stretching it out over time. If you look at it from a marketing and advertising and training and education perspective from the company, if they can do things in a tighter schedule, it just reduces their overhead cost, which is why when bigger companies buy multiple stores, the EBITDA, the amount, the multiplier that they apply is usually higher than in a single store.
Got it. And we're going to talk about that, by the way. So if anyone hears an acronym that they're not familiar with, like EBITDA, we are going to chat about that in a few minutes, because I think it's key and critical to our discussion. Norm, let me, I'm not going to ask you to comment on what Joel and Dennis just said, but I want to move in a slightly different direction. There are shop owners that are ready for their second store. And then there are a lot of two shop owners ready for their third. Is this something that you guys also do, or are you just looking for the really big deal?
Well, as a company, we like to focus on larger deals. It makes it easier for us as well. But we have in the past consolidated companies just because that's what the regional buyers are looking for. And I would tell you that from a seller's perspective, it behooves them to, if they're a single store operator, if they have the people in place, and this is a very sensitive topic. Oftentimes everybody wants to be very large in their market, and they think going from one store to two stores, they can double their profit. And in my experience, quite the opposite usually happens. They get fragmented. They don't have the people to run the second store. They end up actually taking their eye off the ball on the first store just to fix the second store. And they end up making less money out of two stores than they did in two. So you hear it over and over again. It's all about good people. And I can't stress that enough, that if you're going to expand, it's a great idea, but make sure that the administrative side and the people side in the second store are there to help you do that.
Got it. A couple of things come to mind. We've done podcasts, we've done town hall academies on acquisitions and modes. I hear the story about number 2 hit me upside brick wall head, boom, and then we had to stop and we had to regroup. And then when we went to 3, it was a little easier. And so there are groups out there, mastermind groups, in fact, Transformers masterminds, that typically works with just multi-store owners and gets them all on the same page and helps them grow. So I guess what I'm starting to hear is that you guys like to do big deals, that some of the bigger multi-store operators are going to be attractive to major regional or national consolidators, right, Norm?
That's correct. And we certainly don't skip over a person with one store. It's just harder to find a qualified buyer to handle one store than it is multiple stores.
So a scenario, because I love scenarios, because I'm an ideas guy. Here's an idea. There's 5 really good operator, big single, a 7 or 8 bay operations in multiple surrounding communities in a city. They're all individual. Now I hear what you're saying. Who wants to do 5 individual transactions? We'd love to do one, but would a consolidator be ever interested in making that, buying up those 5? Is who was it saying? Joel, was it about market share? Would that ever possibly be a transaction? 5 individuals that one person buys all at once?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We're starting to see some of that. I think what you see from an industry perspective is that a lot of the much larger operators, I'll call them 10 store plus, have been consolidated over the years. Certainly folks like myself, when I was on the other side, we're doing that for many years. And so what you're left with is still an industry that's very fragmented. And so you have these buyers out there that need to continue acquiring. And, kind of what's left are the smaller operators. So whether it be single store, 2 store, 3 store, there's still a lot of opportunity to consolidate. So, buyers are being more creative. And in that scenario that you talked about is an example of one path to do that.
Got it. Okay. I love the setup. Thank you very much. I think this last, say, 10 minutes has helped us think about what we're going to talk about here, and it maybe got some people starting to think about changing their future plans or visions about their business. Let's go into some math, guys, because you guys can't be in business unless you understood the financial statement and the big number, the EBITDA, and somebody mentioned the word multiplier. What the heck is a multiplier? So who wants to take a stab and teach us something about the accounting side of a transaction?
Well, Joel being a CPA, maybe we're going to let him do that.
Sure.
Oh, Joel, you're a CPA too. I didn't know that. Well, great.
Yeah.
Then yes, you would be the guy.
Although in these situations, I tend not to admit that, but yes, I am by training a CPA. So,
Okay.
so EBITDA it's standard industry talk amongst multiple industries. But EBITDA, by its definition, is earnings. Think of it as net income or operating profit, plus adding back items such as or before taxes, interest, depreciation, and amortization. So if you take your net income number and add back those line items that I just referenced, that gets you an EBITDA number. And so it's also referred to or commonly referred to as, let's say, free cash flow. So it's the true earnings that the business itself is putting off. And what that is commonly looked at or most often looked at as the primary measure for establishing what the value of your business is, with the multiplier factor incorporated into that.
And so a multiplier is, Joel, say for example, the EBITDA of a business is $100,000,
Yep.
and the buyer would take a look at that and give you and pay a multiple of it.
That's correct.
And so, say for example, somebody was said, "Well, is it?" Let me ask a question: is it by industry, or is it just what the buyer? How do you come up with a multiplier? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, if you look across different industries, certainly there are different multiples. You go from some industries, IT is a good example where businesses, really produce very little income, but they're getting paid these huge amounts of money in a purchase. In the service and tire industry, an established industry, that multiple is fairly well known by, all the buyers out there, and many of the sellers at least have heard about the different multiple ranges that exist out there today.
And give me, go ahead, tell us.
Yeah, so I mean, on a single store, just as a starting point, we've often looked at a 3 to 5 multiple as a starting point.
Okay.
As the number of store locations go up that we talked about earlier, and the willingness for buyers and the eagerness for buyers to purchase those businesses, those multiples will in fact go up. So 3 to 5, kind of starting at the low end, all the way up to 7, 8, 9, 10 plus, just depending on how big the business is and certainly how eager that buyer is to have those stores. So
let me say that that's the offer for the business. That includes the assets?
That includes the assets, including typically a minimum inventory value as well.
Right, and I think that's important for people to know. Many owners will sit in their business and they'll, my alignment machine is worth $20,000, and my tire machine is worth this, and they're trying to put all this number, and I make X amount of, and they come up with a number. And in the real world, as you will, of CPAs or buying and selling, even if a single store buyer comes up and wants to buy the guy in the next town, he's still going to go to his accountant, and the accountant is going to manage the numbers, look at the P&L, but I guess what we have to be concerned about in our industry is that the typical CPA, Joel, may not necessarily know how to evaluate an automotive business. Is that true?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. I think there is some uniqueness to our industry. You referenced, a seller looking at all the assets and trying to come up with a number that way. But in our industry, that's really not, I've yet to see a deal valuation be established that way. So
you can't really expect to get enough in an asset sale anyway.
Correct. That's absolutely right. And that's why buyers will, look at it, their first starting point is always EBITDA. Always.
And let me give you an example, Carm. I got a phone call 2 days ago from a lady that wanted to sell one tire store, rather large, doing about $3 million in sales. And an employee made an offer that he was interested in buying. So the employee went to a CPA, and the CPA did a value, came back at, thought the company was worth $287,000. The owner thought that was way too low, so she went to her own CPA, and he came back with a value of $2.3 million. Now, neither one of them based it on EBITDA. And so the purpose for bringing this up is that people out there need to be very careful. Many times CPAs think they are business valuation experts, and unless they really go through the exercise of using the EBITDA method, I would tell you most likely they're not going to arrive at the right price for that business.
Norm, did you have a chance to look at it, and did you come up with a number?
I did, and the number's closer to probably about $1 million.
Okay.
And that's really what the market will pay. And so you really have to have all your facts together before you try to go to the market. And obviously that's what we do. And I would tell everybody to use brokers that are licensed and certified to do this kind of work.
That's a great point. Cardinal Brokers. We'll make sure that your website's in the show page. Appreciate that. So interesting. So it lends itself to. I love the idea of selling internally, and we've seen a lot of transactions. Talked to a lot of people that have done that have a 5-year plan to get their number one person involved and work with SBA and work on down payments and stuff. Can you guys help us with some of that? And were you thinking, Jeff, when I'm sorry, I'm going all in 7 different directions, but that's sometimes, I'm a squirrel, there's a nut. And Jeff, when you were looking at your son to take over, were you structuring a deal, something like that?
Well, we hadn't gotten to that point.
Okay.
So we hadn't put a value on anything. It was just, I just assumed eventually when we got to the point, I felt like turning it over to him, we would work out some kind of internal financing, but really hadn't set anything in stone.
What is your son doing now?
Well, I was very fortunate, and that's one factor that helped me decide to go ahead with the sale. Is I had a brother who had a similar operation and on the other side of our town, and he was looking to retire, and he had no heirs to leave the business to or no one interested in it. So my son ended up purchasing his shop, and that enabled me to go ahead and complete the transaction with Monroe.
Wow, it had to be so good for your heart to see that happen.
Oh, it was great. It was.
I bet you.
I would tell you, Carm, when you sell to family, that it's a different structure altogether. There's a lot of extra dynamics. Typically, the sale will be off the books, and there's a lot of longer term payouts to the parents as the son or daughter takes over the business. When it's done with employees, it's usually out of some kind of indebtedness that the employees have gotten them where they are today. And there are things like the SBA can help a little bit. You can try and form what's called an ESOP or a co-op to help with funding. The two main issues for an owner selling to employees, not that they shouldn't do it, but 2 things that they need to consider if they're thinking about it. Number one is the amount of money you'll probably have to self-finance. It's highly unlikely your store manager is going to come up with enough money through traditional banking to be able to finance the deal. So you're going to have to retain the risk of the business's success or failure as you sell out. So your pay amount of money you're going to get is going to be drawn out further. And then the second piece of that is if they fail, If they don't make the company successful and they lose enough money and have to go through bankruptcy, you're stuck holding the bag, and you thought you were retired and you're right back in the business. When you end up selling to let's say another regional player, 2 towns over, or you sell to a large national player, those risks are gone. And also the amount of money you'll be able to sell the business for is higher. If you're going to sell to an employee, you're probably not going to get 4 to 5 times EBITDA. You'll probably get 2.5 to 3, just because of the sheer dollar amount of the transaction.
I've heard some stories about that where they've done an internal deal with their manager. The manager starts earning their down payment out of yearly bonuses. Some have, in 5 years they have enough for the SBA as a down. Some takes 5 years to happen, but then the owner gets all their money. And part of the requirement of the program is that they have to have a business coach. They've got to get certain schooling because they're looking to ensure that long term. If the owner decided to carry some money, he wanted to ensure the success of the business. But on the way up and through, before the transaction happens, they start, joining 20 groups, getting coaching, and all of that, if you will, businessman insurance, if you will, by that level of education. Businessman insurance, I like that. That's a great concept. That is to put this person out and finally educate them that they're no longer a technician or a service writer. They're now a business owner. Thank you for that. I love all this great dialogue. But Jeff, I wanted to ask you, are you having any fun now? Are you retired, relaxed? Tell me, where's your state of mind?
It's very nice being able to get up when I want to in the morning, doing what I want to do, not having to stress. We were just talking about that this morning. I ran into a neighbor while I was out running, and he said, it must be nice just to get up and do what you want. I said, it's fantastic. So yes, I'm enjoying it very much.
Good for you. Good for you. Hey, one more shout out to Jasper. Performance and reliability. That's what Jasper's remanufactured diesel engines provide mile after mile. Jasper's running completed engines are dynamometer tested with horsepower and torque ratings recorded. There's a nationwide warranty included too. Talk about dependable service. JasperEngines.com. Hey team, let's talk about normalizing the P&L, getting it right. And someone had mentioned we need 2 years to make it work. So I'm going to open up the forum to you guys. Who wants to start? How do we do this?
I would say first thing is cash sales. We've seen that come up a lot.
Really? Oh, okay. When you say cash sales, you're talking about no one holds paper?
Recorded.
Record them. Okay. Yeah. Hello.
So
that's absolutely critical. A lot of guys look at that sometimes as, extra spend money, but if you think about it, for every dollar that you put into business from a cash sale, that goes literally to the bottom line, and that's worth 3 to 5 times if you own a single store. And it's worth a lot more if you own multiple stores. Mm-hmm. So factory rebates, cash sales, those sorts of things need to stay in the business. And typically it flows as part of profits and gets you a bigger payout when you're ready to step down.
Mm-hmm. As a side note, a single store, I can see how that's done. And then you have a second store and you're saying, can't do it as much. And the third store is, I don't want to teach my people how to do this. And so it's almost like the bigger you get, the more legitimizes all those sales. Am I right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But Dennis, thank you for saying that. I mean, you literally said, guys, if you're going to prepare, legitimize everything. And in fact, how about the gas for the boat and the rent for the slip out at the lake and the summer home? Should I take that off my P&L too?
There's so every business owner has what would be considered a perk, right? The business pays for some aspect of their lifestyle, a country club membership, some travel to different places, there are legitimate reasons to have those types of expenses run through the business. Part of the calculation of EBITDA also includes some types of those owner perks. If you travel to go to a 20 group meeting, that's an owner perk that's going to get added back into the value. A country club for networking purposes, you probably could legitimately add that back in. Grocery bills and diapers and formula, probably not going to get added back in. Even though the owner may think it's, sometimes they run a daycare center, it's probably not going to legitimately get added back in. So there's a part of our process and some of the value that we bring to the equation is that we help the owner sit down and go line by line over all of those things and figure out which of these things are going to add value to their business and which of these things have you enjoyed the perk and now need to cease doing.
I have to stop for a moment and ask the next tough question about that. You say that we'll normalize it in the EBITDA calculation, and I get that. So I can continue to do all that stuff, and then when it comes to sell, then I'm going to make sure I get a really good broker or an accountant to tell the buyer, by the way, all this dark stuff is in there. Or are you suggesting that we start normalizing and cleaning it up now so I don't have to play that game?
Cleaning it up is a better term. You said all that stuff, and it depends on what all that stuff is.
Okay.
Some of it you can legitimately keep doing because it provides some benefit to you as the owner in running the business.
Okay. Yeah.
That a new owner is not going to require. So you can add that to the value. I
went to a 20 group meeting in Orlando, took the family. We called it a vacation, but the business paid for it. Is that going to be a line item transaction, Joel, that the buyer is going to look at every scrutinized expense? And
yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, those type of items would typically be added back. Would be added back to the overall earnings of the business. So travel for yourself and your family. Another common one and very simple is cell phones. So, specifically owner cell phones. We often find where it's not just the owner's cell phone, it's the owner's spouse, it's the 3 kids, and it's the 8 grandkids. And so before you know it, it's $10,000 of cell phone bills for the year. I think what's important from a seller's perspective is that they just keep tabs on those numbers. And so when you get to a position where you sit down with someone like us, that you can explain and you can support those numbers. And I think that's the most important thing, is being able to support those what they call owner related expenses, because again, when the owner sells the business, those salaries will go away, and so those are legitimate add back to the overall earnings of the business. And quite frankly, most buyers will give credit for that as well. And they recognize and understand that.
So as a seller, I need just to be prepared to know all that information and bring it either to my broker or to the buyer and say, by the way, look at this report. There's some stuff it's not going to happen at your end. So we're adding that back.
Absolutely. Yep. That's absolutely said correctly.
So don't stop what you're doing, but prepare to bring it to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I would say now I think to address Dennis's point, I mean, there is a point where it can be excessive. And I think that's where Dennis was going. I mean, there are legitimate owner-related expenses. All owners have a cell phone, and it's legitimate to have the business pay for that cell phone. Then that's one extreme. That's perfectly understandable. Then there are, as Dennis would say, the diapers and formula, where it becomes more excessive. And you do get to a point where if the business is only putting off, let's say it's $100,000, and when you add back all of the adjustments, it's now $500,000. it's wow, that's a pretty big difference, and we're not sure we're going to give you credit for all of that.
So now it's going to be scrutinized even heavier.
That's right, absolutely.
They're gonna need 3 weeks to go line by line.
That's right.
Yeah, and I
That's
wanted to
right.
sell this thing tomorrow, and now I have to wait.
That's right.
I got it. Okay.
That's right.
Norm, you seen a lot of that kind of stuff?
Sometimes excessive, as Joel said. Most of the time, most guys are pretty prudent about, what they take out, and that's good for everybody. And I would say another item like life insurance, which is critical to the business. God forbid something happened to the owner, you want to make sure you're taking care of the spouse. But that would be a legitimate add back to the earnings, because obviously the buyer would not expect to have a manager come in and give him a life insurance policy. So generally, most guys are fairly prudent. Every once in a while, you run into a guy that goes from 100,000 to, as Joel said, maybe upwards to 5, but that's rare and that's excessive. So
Okay. Let's talk about the center of the wheel, the owner, who has done a terrible job of delegating and, he's staying completely engaged in his business. I looked to buy this business and realized that if Joe left, the business crashes into a black hole without him. And I want to bring my people in, but he seems to be the face of the business. He seems to be the business. And since I'm not buying him, I may have a huge risk of, keeping the business going. Is there any advice in that area?
Yeah, I think buyers look for. I think you said it perfectly, because that is a scenario that we see sometimes, and it becomes a real concern from a buyer's perspective. Our advice, and I think from a buyer's perspective, they like to see process and procedures. They like to know that if the owner decides to take a long weekend, that the business doesn't fall apart when they're gone. Certainly you can understand if you're running one or two stores, that you may not have a full standard operating procedure for everything that happens in the store, but they want to know that there's a general process and there are general procedures in place, so it prevents that type of situation where the owner / manager doesn't come along with the business sale, and there's risk from a buyer perspective that that face of the company is no longer there, and so that that big check that they just cut is almost overnight much less from an investment perspective.
Yeah, Carm, you brought up a point earlier about the difficulties of going from 1 to 2 to 3 stores. And Norm talked about having the right people in place, and Joel is hitting on having a system in place. You can't be owner centric. Because you live and die by the hero syndrome. The store needs to be able to function almost irrelevant of who's in it, the steps and procedures of it. So the more evidence you have of that when you're presenting the business to a buyer, the more comfortable they are in paying a premium, which is why one of the reasons a multi-store operation is going to carry a higher multiplier than a single or 2-store operation. Because like Joel just said, it's a higher risk, because you may end up with a database and a POS system.
Yeah. It has to be a well-oiled running machine. I've always said, I don't know where I ever came up with this quote, that processes and systems win wars.
Yep.
And everybody's shaking their head. They get it. They know what I mean. And that is so critical, that even if a buyer comes in and implements their system, at least the group knows what living inside of processes and systems is about. And we're not having to, teach someone for the first time, this is how we do things. And these are the scenarios if this situation happens.
And to his credit, Jeff had a well-oiled machine. His company he could take a month off and his company would not miss a beat. So I tip my hat to him for doing that.
Thank you.
Good, good, good. Hey, we got a question here from in the chat room from my friend Kevin Eckler. He says, "Are you looking more at general repair or more specialty shop groups for acquisition?" Now he says we're about to expand to 2 locations and are deciding if one will be specialty with the other being general, but are 2 specialty shops worth more? Like, for example, Euro or Asian.
I mean, I can take this one. I mean, at least from the buyers that we deal with, and the kind of the largest names you can think of out there in our space. I mean, general repair tends to be where they want to be. I mean, it's harder to maintain whatever that kind of specialty, niche that they're operating in.
Wait a minute. A larger consolidator, it would be harder to maintain the niche.
That's right.
I got it.
That's right. And
Okay.
so general repair so they can fit them into their, I'll call it cookie cutter, operating model. That tends to be more valuable from a buyer's perspective.
You guys agree?
I would say that if you're running several specialty shops, there are going to be folks in that specific arena that would acquire and probably pay a higher price. But there are fewer and fewer of those guys out there, to Joel's point. So I think if you're, for instance, a tire shop as Jeff was, and he was heavy into repair, there's a bigger market for that than there might be for a guy that's a wheel specialist, so to speak.
Yeah. Repair is it today. I mean, I don't know, Joel, is that what you see? It's great to have the tires, but you got to have the repair, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you're generating, the majority of your margin. I mean, you're operating at a much higher margin with a higher mix of repair. And I think that's generally known. But it's having a mix of tire sales is good too, because it's always everything that goes along with it. So it's not just selling the tire; it's the alignment, it's the other tag along service work that also goes along with it too. So they do play well off of each other for sure.
Let's do a scenario. Kevin Eckler decides to open his second store as a Euro store, and he basically said in the chat room, hey, for us, Euro is much more profitable. BMWs, Volvos, et cetera, et cetera. It's a more profitable business model. So he does a second location and he makes it Euro. And then he does a third and he makes it Euro. Would he be attractive to maybe a regional consolidator because of the profitability of his model?
I would say probably more local buyers would look at that far more attractively than somebody, let's say, 2 or 3 states away, just because in that market there's a specialty of Euro vehicles being worked on, and clearly they do make a higher profit on those specialty repairs, let's say, than a typical guy like Jeff in a tire store. So I think they're in a great spot, and I think they make a lot of money. But when it comes time to sell, it's a little harder to find a buyer for those specialty shops than it is for a general shop, let's say.
I got it. But I also think it's one hell of an attractive business model versus the big national consolidators.
No question.
Because there's no doubt.
I
may not trust the guy with the 1,500 stores to my Euro car,
right?
But I will trust a Kevin Eckler, and so that's good advice for you, Kevin. Interesting. And he also asked another question, gentlemen, for the panel: is a business with a long-term lease, is it less valuable than an owner-occupied?
I don't. I look at it typically as a lever, right? And it's a lever that adjusts the overall purchase price. Whether it's owner occupied or it's a long-term lease with a third party, I don't think that there's a lot of determination in the overall valuation of the business, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Once that owner sells their business, they just become a normal landlord like anybody else. I mean, unfortunately, that's just kind of the way it is, and you'll be treated, in your relationship with that buyer will become that of a landlord and lessee. So, it doesn't really impact the overall, valuation. Now, I will say this, as an owner occupied, where you have the business, where you own the business and you own the lease, the interesting dynamic there is the lever becomes, all right, how much purchase price do you want to get up front from selling the business versus what do you want from a long-term lease or rent? So there's some back and forth negotiation that you can do there. Do you want to have it all up front now, or would you rather have a steadier or a higher rental stream in the future? So again, it's just a lever that an owner has when they're going into those discussions with the buyer.
I would ask that all the, not necessarily young in age, but young in ownership owners out there, forgo your boat, forgo your second house, forgo your dream car, save up, and if you don't own the land, buy your land.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever get the opportunity, because that becomes a really nice revenue stream when you go to retire. And not all owners are going to set themselves up business-wise to contribute to Social Security and government-funded retirement plans. So it's important that they have some kind of residual income. You're not always going to get the opportunity to buy. It depends on the landlord and your arrangement. But if you get the opportunity, people out there, try and position yourself so you at least have a chance at doing it.
To that point, I can't tell you, over the years that I've been doing this, the quote I've heard most often is, I've made far more money off of real estate than I ever have off of selling my business. So it's a good point, Dennis.
Great point, Dennis. Thank you. Hey, as the average age of vehicles keeps rising, your customer's old engine or transmission's gonna wear out. And when that day comes, Jasper will be the name to remember. Jasper's remanufactured products cost considerably less than a new vehicle, so it just makes sense to choose Jasper for your customers' drive-train solutions. Thank you, Jasper. Hey, I so much want to thank Dennis McCarron from Cardinal Brokers, Norm Gaither from Cardinal Brokers, and their other partner in crime here, principals of Cardinal Brokers, Joel Zaleski. Also, Jeff Pullman. Jeff Pullman was here, who recently sold his business, and great to hear your perspective on things. Now, guys, before we leave, I really want to go around the room, and if there's anything we haven't covered or that you would love to share with all of our listeners, we would sure love to hear it from you. We'll start with you, Joel, and then we'll go around the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this is, you said it correctly earlier, that this really is it's a seller's market right now. Interest rates remain low. So as Norm said, buyers are borrowing money relatively cheaply, and, there's still favorable, overall tax structures out there, with the current administration. And so this is a really good time if someone's thinking about, an owner is thinking about it, whether it be, 2 years from now or even 5 years from now. It's a good time to start, maybe engaging in those conversations with, folks similar to us, or your accountant, or maybe even your attorney, just to make sure that, you're planning accordingly. And thinking about and making the right business decisions today to set you up for success when you do get to that point in really selling your business. So,
thanks, Joel. Appreciate you being here, Jeff. From your perspective as the recent seller, any final words?
Well, this is not a promotion for Norm and his group, but I would urge anyone interested in selling their business to get a broker who specializes in our industry or familiar with our industry. They're going to be able to better value your business and also have more connections that's going to lead to an eventual sale. So Norm did a great job for me, and I'm sure I'm seeing more value in the outcome with the leases that we brokered, and just the amount of the deal itself that more than offset the costs.
Any regrets?
No regrets whatsoever.
You do it again, huh?
Love to do it again.
Get that paycheck again.
Yes, right.
Oh, yeah. Times two.
Yes.
Norm, your final words.
I would say that to anybody considering to sell, take time to clean up your business, get everything straight, minimize all the excessive benefits that you're taking out, and build up your bottom line, because that's what's going to build up your final paycheck. So keep things clean, keep everything in the business, and you're going to have higher profits. It'll be a bigger EBITDA, and it'll be a bigger paycheck.
So Norm, I've got this $10,000 cell phone bill that, because as Dennis said earlier, it's me, the kids, the grandkids, there's 18 cell phones on the bill. So what you're really saying is you don't have to stop doing that. Just take some more salary, pay for it on your own, right?
Well, cell phone to that extreme would be an add back. So you would get
Okay.
it. You would get that price regardless, but maybe the boats, the airplanes.
All right.
I actually had it.
But pay yourself some more money and
Yes.
just take the expense out of the business.
There you go.
That's right.
Okay.
It's cleaner.
Okay. It's
Much
cleaner.
cleaner.
Much cleaner. Thank you very much. Dennis, you have the last word.
Well, I'm going to reiterate something that Norm has said for as long as I've known him, and Carm, I've heard you repeat it as well. Take more time to work on your business rather than in your business. We are in an era of tumultuous change. Change in technicians, change in technician talent, availability. It's a consolidation market. Interest is cheap for cash. All of these things are creating a market, and you need to take, as an owner, a step back and just evaluate where you are in your own plan, or start laying out the ideas of, do I want to sell to a bigger player? Do I want to sell to my family? How many more years do I have left in the gas tank? At least think about it and start to formulate a plan. Don't just unlock the door every day and get behind the counter and write up orders.
Wow, you've just described a vast majority of the people that own shops today.
Mhm.
Wow. And so, and I rarely do this. I always just say goodbye. Thanks for being here. But you got me to think. What's the average age out there? I mean, there's a huge amount of owners and players that are ripe for selling. What would you have a number? Do you have an idea? I mean, you guys wouldn't have started this business had you not seen a huge upside.
Well, we have, and we do, and I would tell you that almost all the people that we talk to, every single one of them says, I've been doing this for 20, 30, some as much as 40 years, and I'm just burned out. It's time to do something else. And typically, I would say if you're feeling burnt out, you're probably hurting the business because you're not as active, and you're probably not giving all your people the attention they need. So consequently, the business is not doing as well as it should. So before you reach that point, you have to get your head straight, or I would say you really need to consider maybe selling the business, stepping away and let somebody else give it the energy it needs.
So you don't want to lose what you currently have. It's a decent going business. And then my next question, if I was listening on the sidelines, is how do I really start? How do I pull myself away? How do I, normalize my P&L? And, maybe what we should do is get back, in maybe, 3 months and talk about the how to make it happen.
I think we could help in doing that. We've had a consulting business for over 35 years, and certainly Dennis continues to do that on a part-time basis. I think we could certainly contribute to that. concept.
Perfect. Hey, thank you guys so much. Dennis McCarron, Norm Gaither, Joel Zaleski, Jeff Pullman. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks. Have a great
Thanks.
weekend.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Tom.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Con.